Hi everybody, this is Cassidy Beischer. Today I'm going to show you how to create what is surely going to arouse and stir up emotions and feelings of unsettling, distress, and anxiety. But don't worry, it's only a plugin. So I'm inside Adobe After Effects. I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm going to name that solid Particular. And you can see it's added to the timeline here. And I'm going to first drop in Trapcode Particular to this layer. I can double click that. If you don't have it, you can download it from redgiant.com. And as you can see, it's added to my effects controls. I'm going to drop down the emitter master control, and you can see we have some particles starting to emit. I'm going to change the particles per second to 290, and I'm going to change the emitter type to a sphere. So to see the effect, I'm going to add a camera, hit OK, hit C on my keyboard, and then I can just start dragging around and orbit around this little sphere of particles that I just created. I'm going to set this to adaptive resolution so I can drag a little faster. Well, it's a crappy quality, so I'm going to turn that back off and forget that I did that. I'm going to reset the camera so I'm back to a straight on angle. Now I'm going to drop down and hit XYZ individual. I want to increase the X emitter size, the horizontal axis. I want this to be wider. So I'm going to take that to maybe 1,900. Yeah, something like that. We'll probably change it later. That's fine for now. So for our particle life random setting, I want to set that to 50 and come down to the particle type and hit glow sphere. As you can see now, our particles have a glow around them, so now they shine like they are intensely heated. Now we're going to want to change the color to, well, you can change it to whatever you want. I'm going to change it to kind of this medium bluish hue. Hit OK there, and make sure this blend mode is set to screen, so now our particles are glowing. And also, let me set this to a fuller resolution so we can see the effect. So setting this to normal, you can see immediately the center becomes less bright, and now these particles seem to be interacting with each other a little better. Gives it a little more realism. Next, I want to go down to the glow setting and bring that blending mode to screen as well. So now our glow has a screen effect as well. And now that's looking real nice like. Next, we are going to our physics controls, and we're going to set our physics model to fluid. Now, fluid has a bunch of cool settings like the force region size, which determines the region around the emitter in which the force affects the particle's position. So let's boost our force region size, taking it up to probably exaggerated setting to 950. Now let's tweak our random Swirl XYZ. And this controls how turbulent swirling forces are applied along the X, Y, and Z axis of the particles. The higher the number, the stronger the forces, and the further the particles travel from their original position. So there's going to be an upsurge in our random Swirl XYZ. I'm going to take this to about 17. Let's see what this looks like. I'm going to hit N on the keyboard. We can render in a specific region in the timeline. There's some interesting things going on, and now there's some interesting things going on, obviously. Some things we need to tweak. The center just seems, there's too much gravity. There's a force in there that is keeping everything together. We're going to need to make some tweaks. But first, I think we need to dive into some buoyancy. And buoyancy defines how much upward positive or downward negative force is applied to the particles. So let's create some buoyancy inflation. Let's take this up to around 60. That looks good. So now we can see they're kind of being pulled upwards now, being sucked up by some sort of mysterious occurrence or obscure event in nature, or it's a setting on the plugin, most likely. And I can tell you this setting is way too high on our buoyancy. We're going to take this back down to 5, and our swirl scale, we're going to take that up. There we go. It's a little more subtle. And the vacuum was too much here. These settings are pretty good. What I love about Trapcode Particular is the very organic quality that it outputs just by tweaking a few settings. Next, we want to pull down our Aux System and set this to continuously. And particles per second, let's take this to 86. We want to inherit the main velocity from our first emitter. Set that to a 9 and then make this, and we'll give this Aux System a particle life of 3.3. That looks good. And to make this a little bit more random, we'll take the life random up to 35% and set this to glow sphere so that our auxiliary also has a nice glow around them. Set that blending mode to screen and our size to 2. Make them a little smaller. There's a little bit too much girth on those auxiliary particles there. So let's do a quick RAM preview, see what that looks like. I'm going to hit 0 on my numeric keypad. And now we've got something interesting going on. It's way too bright. Way too bright. There's not enough subtleness to this. Let's decrease the opacity on our Aux System particles to 28. See what that does. A little better. Now, let's set the color over life to... Let's get rid of this rainbow looking color ramp here. So the start of the particle, I'm just going to hit a preset here to work from. I want the start of the particle life to be a blue to a gray. I want it to drift from blue to gray. Let's get rid of this middle color. I'm going to double click and set that to a very similar blue as our main particle emitter, and then drag this white ramp, the ending color, and double click that to edit it. Drag that down to a grayish hue, and now we're picking up on some more subtleties here. I can actually see what's going on as our particles and tendrils grow. Now, it might be nice to add some air resistance here. Right now it's 0. In the real world, we have some air fighting against what's going on. So we're going to take this not too high. We just need a little bit. Just a little bit of air love. And yeah, rendering looks good. Now let's start making some tweaks. Emitter size Y, let's take this to 0 and the Z to 0. So really we're just expanding the X emitter size, like it's growing in a line. I think that's more interesting than if the particles were growing in some type of field. Now I still feel like this is too bright here. Our auxiliary particles, it's cool. It's just too much. You can't see what's going on because of the blending modes here and the fact that there's just so many. So let's take our opacity down to 10. Yeah, now we can see what's actually going on here. Now the glowing balls that are kind of leading our auxiliary particles are starting out too big. I think we should change the size over life setting so that they start out a little bit smaller and then kind of grow over time. So we're gonna come down here to our size over life and hit that preset here. I'm going to uncontrollably click with rough force on the smooth button here to smooth out that blasted pointy curve. Now let's tweak our size here and size random. So we don't want everything to be the same here. Again, we're going for organic. So we're going to change our size random to 15 and our size to 2. So now they're a little more meager in size instead of this flabby, corpulent string. What else can we do to improve upon this glorious, slender particle system? I think we can add another particle layer here. So I'm going to, let's name this particle 1 and then hit Command D to duplicate that layer. So we're going to use this new particle as a starting point for what I'm thinking of doing. I'm going to shut off our auxiliary system. So now we only have particles emitting with no auxiliary particles. Let's solo our, no, not that layer, this layer. And let's change our random setting so that our particles are very different from our original particle layer. So unsoloing that layer, we can see now our new layer is on top of our other layer. Let's increase our particles per second to 500. Let's just go crazy. Now we have a ton of particles emitting on top of our other layer here. And I'm going to hit screen so that they blend in here. Now we have our particles growing with another layer that isn't emitting particles, but it's kind of its own independent particle system controlling its own destiny while still making the other particle system look good. Now we need to work on our angle here. Instead of moving the Trapcode layer in 3D space, I'm going to create a null object and I'm going to parent the camera to the null object. Hit P for position, and we need to make this 3D, so we're going to go to our toggle switch modes and hit our little Frankie-hedron, make that sucker 3D. We're going to pull it forward in Z space and adjust the Y position to bring it down in frame. You'll notice that Trapcode Particular is a render hog, so I'm going to solo, nope, wrong layer. First let's rename this Particle 1 and Particle 2. Let's solo our independently free particle system so we can adjust our camera a little easier here, pulling this down in Y space. Because I only have that one layer on, it's easier now to make adjustments because there's barely anything going on in that second particle layer. And our timeline is just massive here. So I was a fool and started working with a timeline that was way too long. Let's make that adjustment now. Place the playhead where I want this to end and hit N. Right click and select Trim Comp to Work Area. Now we've just adjusted our timeline. And that's it. We've created a formidable, growing tendril inside Adobe After Effects with Trapcode Particular. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, be safe and don't drink Lysol.